And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Music City Gold on the Penalty Box Radio Network. I am your host, Kyle. With me, as always, my co-hosts, Daniel and Matt.
Hello.
Hey, guys.
So, Matt, before we get into the episode today, I want to start off with a question. I'm going to ask both you and Daniel. I'm going to start with you first because you always have the best answers for this.
That's what I'm talking about.
What'd you get for Christmas this year?
Christmas, Kyle, you know we got to get some hockey stuff in here, so I got some pretty good hockey stuff this year. You know, at my house, in my game room, I have where we watch hockey. I got a big screen TV, and I got all my walls are filled with hockey autographed memorabilia. Well, I got a new office upgrade at work, so I'm redecorating my office, and I'm going to make it kind of like a Hockey Cave Central. I've got a signed, autographed Miracle on Ice game photograph from the classic Miracle on Ice game. I also got, every year that the Red Wings won the Cup, I have this Legends Never Die poster. It's another photo, and it's got the roster list, like the roster card. So every year they've won 4 times in my lifetime. I've got that going on. So I've got them framed and ready to go, and I'm also getting a hockey stick, and I'm going to put all of that in my office. So make a little man cave going on.
Well, that's very impressive. Daniel, what about you?
Man, this year I feel like it was a bunch of utility stuff, like practical stuff, which
Signs of being an adult.
yeah, I mean, that just happens as you get older, but I actually do prefer that because it's kind of nice. I'm trying to think it's on the side. Oh, like we got a drill for the house now. Like, you know, it's like when you get a home, like you need some of these things, but you just keep putting it off. So it's like, yeah, stuff like that. And then Victoria got me kind of this, bigger present for me, and that was a leather overnight duffel bag. So it's like all 100% premium leather with like a nylon satchel, like rope cord. It's fantastic. So, and it's got my initials on it, which is even better. So now I have like a full leather kit. I have that, the leather backpack. I have a leather jacket from Italy that I got leather boots. So we're good to go.
Well, I got a gift that I think beats both of y'all.
Wow.
I think I know what it is. Go ahead.
I'm going to be the father of a baby boy.
Very impressive, Kyle.
Future hockey player coming up. All 5'8" of them.
Coach Kyle, that's what I'm talking about. Coming up in about 10 years.
Now, just to give a backstory, my wife and I have known for a while that we were expecting, but we weren't sure of the gender. And one story I've told the guys here, but I'll tell everybody else as well, just because it's something that my wife is really just well known for, is she researches everything tremendously. Doesn't matter what it is. The smallest thing to the biggest thing, she researches nonstop. And I'm sitting there in the office one day working at home, and she goes, "Hey, you want to call?" And I was like, "No." She goes, "Okay, I have a story to tell you." I was like, "Okay." She goes, "The story is, I'm pregnant." I was like, "What? You're pregnant?" She's like, "Yeah." She goes, "But the story is, I checked not once, not twice, but I checked 8 times just to be sure." I was like, "Oh my goodness. So you're definitely sure?" She's like, "Yep." So that started the whole, we're going to be parents. And let me tell you, it's something that everyone has said, it will hit you when it happens. And already I'm just like, man, I'm going to make this kid the biggest hockey nerd, the biggest game nerd. And it's just going to be amazing. As Matt says, full send, let's go. Let's do this.
That's awesome. I can't believe she dropped the news on you over a phone call, though. That seems like an in-person
I
conversation.
know. She was in the room.
Oh, okay.
She'd asked if I was on a call for work because it was during the work day.
I see.
Work from home stuff. So I got 2 great uncles right here. They're going to help me raise this boy, right?
Man, it's
We're
gonna be
have.
good.
We just need to all be 3 coaches of a team. That's what I'm talking about.
We're going to have him in the Final Fantasy crew online in no time. He's going to be hitting those rotations in the dungeon. It's going to be fantastic. And we're going to have him up there with his little hockey stick, some fang fingers, of course, up at the games, just going to town. And I'm super excited. It was great news for us. It was kind of a shock. But to your point, the 8 times, that is pretty funny. Like, I'm sure you spent a pretty good amount of cash just on those, whatever they are, blue, whatever reading things for the pregnancy thing. But I do have to say a funny story because, obviously we're not trying to have a kid right now, but my wife is also on birth control. So it's like one of those, she was like, "Oh, I don't know." It was like a sketch moment. And she's like, "I'm going to go buy something." Like, Matt's shaking his head because have you been there? Have you had a little scary moment where you're like, "Oh no," whatever. And I was just like, there's no possible way. and turns out we weren't. But you just sometimes like you got to go get one just to be sure, just for that peace of mind. And she definitely, I think, used 2 just to be 100% certain. But 8, that's I would say that's pretty fairly confident. So Matt, have you had some run-ins like that?
Yeah, I'll say here's to staying positive and testing negative.
Negative, baby.
What we got going on in the hockey world, Kyle?
Well, it actually leads into this story because I told Chelsea, I said, it's a good name for our child, which she immediately shot down. I said, Juuse. She's like, why? I said, because Juuse is like the best Preds player that we've had in a long time outside Roman Josi. In fact, he's so good that he is the only Pred who is going to the 23 All-Star game in Florida, which, makes sense because he backstops his team. He's great on this team. Had a mutual friend of ours go to the Canadian games the other night, and she left the game going, the Preds won, but they won because of the goalie. And I think it's well-deserved that Juuse is going to the All-Star game. In fact, we'll skip down just a little bit here. The All-Star rosters came out. In the Metro, you had Sidney Crosby, you had Johnny Gaudreau, Kevin Hayes, Jack Hughes, Brock Nelson, Alex Ovechkin, Andrei Snechkov, and Igor Shesterkin. And in the Atlantic, you had Nikita Kucherov, Dylan Larkin, your boy, Matt.
Let's go.
Yep.
Mitch Marner, Nick Suzuki, Tage Thompson, who I don't know.
He's awesome.
Bro, he's been
He's
lighting
very
it
good.
up. That's Buffalo. That is Buffalo.
You had brothers Brady and Matthew Tkachuk, which are the first brothers since 2012 to be in an All-Star game together,
Since
which I
the
believe
Sedins.
Sedins.
Go.
Linus Ullmark got in. Central, you had Kirill Kripasov, you had Clayton Keller, Jason Robertson from Dallas, Vladimir Tarasenko, Seth Jones, Cale Makar, Josh Morrissey, and of course Juuse Saros. And in the Pacific, you had Matty Beniers. You also had
I think Kevin Fiala was on there too.
which is a shocker. Kevin Fiala made it.
Wow.
He's been lighting it up, actually.
He has.
You had Nazem Kadri, you had Connor McDavid, of course, Elias Pettersson, Troy Terry, Eric Carlson, and finally Logan Thompson. So Daniel, we'll start with you. What do you think about these rosters?
I don't know. So are we just kind of like rating them? Well, I got it right here, so I'm trying to think of
Maybe pick
pick
which
one to win.
Yeah, the strongest division.
I mean, Metro looks pretty strong, but at the same time, too, you could make an argument for the Pacific. Kadri's great. McDavid can do what McDavid does, but I'm gonna have to go with the Metro. They even got super strong goaltending with Igor back there too. I mean that's a pretty high flying roster in my opinion. So, what about you, Matt?
I'm leaning towards Metro. The Atlantic looks pretty interesting. I think I'm going to sleep on the Central and the Pacific.
Yeah,
Specifically the Central.
yeah. The Central looks kind of weak this year.
But that kind of goes to show you the East is a beast in general. So as it always is, the Metro has got some powerhouses. So my money's on them.
And I will say also, as we talk about this, that this is one of the only All-Star games I've seen where we had so few defensemen make it. In fact, as I look through the list here, the only defenseman I saw who made it was Seth Jones, Cale Makar, Josh Morrissey, and Eric Carlson. The rest is the goalies, of course, and forwards. Like, this is a stupidly stacked offensive power team. And you got to think, for people that's in the Metro or the Atlantic, 2 of these guys are going to have to play defense at least. So it'll be interesting to see. Could you imagine Sidney Crosby playing defense?
That would be awesome.
Alexander Ovechkin playing defense? Like, oh my
Ovi
goodness.
could play defense.
I will say, from a brand of hockey you're putting on the ice, from a viewer standpoint, it'd be pretty nice to see a lot of high-flying offense, like 5 attackers. We kind of see some of that in the overtime. You're like, well, what kind of mix do you have? Do you want how many forwards versus defensemen? Do you want to go more aggressive? So this could be a fun little nod in that direction where you say, hey, let's throw 5 attackers on the ice and see how many goals we can score up and make it a match here. Could be fun to watch.
Well, I will say I agree with you guys. I think the Metro is going to probably be the one to watch. I mean, the star power on there is just amazing. And I think, they do this whole thing every year with the semifinals and then the final. I think the Metro is going to take it, but I think the Metro is going to probably end up playing the Central for it this year. My hopes is the Central gets it. I would like Central to win because Saros is on the team, but I do think the Metro is going to take it just because of the star power quality on it.
How about, why don't we look at this roster again? And out of this roster, tell me which player you're rooting for the most on this list.
For each division
Just
or
overall. If one name stands out to you that you're like, man, I want that guy to do really well.
I mean, is Keller the underrated pick just because he's from Arizona? But I mean, that's fine. Linus has been fantastic for Boston, so I think he's going to do just fine. But for me, I probably would have to go with Tage Thompson because he's been lighting it up there in Buffalo. So he's been like a highlight reel machine this year with all these crazy goals that you've been seeing. So I've thoroughly enjoyed watching him. So I think I'd like to see him light it up in the All-Star game.
What about you, Matt?
I got to go for my boy Jason Robertson. He's been lighting it up this year. Gave me a real hard on for him. I've been on him for a couple years. To see him do so well this year has made me smile. And you're laughing at me, but that's my guy. So I got to go with Jason Robertson.
And as for myself, I'll pick Nick Suzuki, another high-five player. Loved watching him last year, and then I think it was also the previous year. I think it was the COVID season that the Montreal did as well as they did. He was a great part of that team. So it's interesting to see what's going to happen. I was thinking South Florida of all places to have it, but it makes sense. We've had it everywhere else, and this is the furthest south it's went. I think if it was going any further south, it'd go to Tampa. So imagine if South Florida gets it, which is amazing because you think of like 5 years ago, we were like trashing Florida, saying it was like a place to go where hockey players went to retire because they would just wash up in their careers. And, it's interesting on Florida. They had a great first season. Their back half is doing terrible, though. And they are, like, hoping to not get knocked out because they were the President's Trophies champion last year, too.
Yeah, well, you talk about Florida. Interestingly, though, again, from a marketability standpoint, they do the governors' meetings every year in Boca Raton, Florida. You know why? Because it's beautiful there. So if you're going to put something on ice where you're trying to draw fans in from a watchability standpoint, why not have it in a gloriously beautiful Florida weather, just like they do everything else? It draws visitors. There's a reason why Disney's in Florida and not in Minnesota. So if you want people to come and be excited about hockey, maybe try to branch out to a non-traditional hockey market and make it a destination place where people can come, get interested in hockey, go have a vacation with their family. It's a really good idea from a market perspective.
Well, it's also interesting that you mentioned Boca Raton because the Board of Governors meeting just happened last month. Now, it's been about a month since we recorded because, holidays happen, life gets in the way, you fit in where you can, So we're here recording now, and the Board of Governors meeting, like I said, was held. And the one thing I took out of the whole thing, besides the cap maybe going up $1 million, was that Gary Bettman is still being asked, is there going to be a play-in wild card round to the playoffs? And Bettman has continued to say there will not be one, and people say that the problem with the playoffs is the format itself. Now, do you guys agree that the playoff format is trouble, or should it be changed?
Well, I'd like to hear an alternate perspective on what you think it should go back to. I like the seeding differently. I think if we could go through, let's see, there was discrepancies between how you do wild cards. Instead of going 1 through 4, instead of going wild card, you go 1 through 8 or something. The way it used to be that a couple years ago, and people seem to like that better. I can't remember exactly the details, the differences is how it is now, but I think everybody hates the play-in round.
Well, I mean, to your point, when, what was it, 2 years ago, we had the play-in for the bubble or whatever it was. I personally didn't like it. I mean, it just was kind of like, why have another one? Like, why have another game? Like, you have 82 games to decide this order anyways. So if you're already on the fritz, like, who cares? Like, the format has been working. Now, I understand that they wanted to kind of change, like, the seeding for the matchups and all that to maybe, like, enhance some of the rivalries. But I feel like we've been getting some pretty good rivalries the last couple years regardless. And quite frankly, if you go across all of the different sports, hockey is the most enjoyable playoff sport. Like, it is by far the best, has the highest watchability in my opinion. But that might just be me. So I definitely would not do a play-in. If anything, they could do a little bit of the restructuring. Maybe they're trying to do the reseeding because they want more like divisional matchups as far as like travel.
Well,
who knows?
Now that you say that, I do remember 2 or 3 years ago, they did the, after you pass the first round, say a 1 seed wins and then a 3 seed wins. Well, the 1 seed gets the 5 seed from down below the bracket. They get the easier matchup, and it reseeds every time to give the higher ranked team an easier play. Well, 2 or 3 years ago, they didn't do that, if you recall, because you could hear me moaning and complaining about it because it affected like the way we do brackets, the way the teams line up and everything. And I thought it was quite unfair. And the reason they specifically did it was, I'm trying to remember the reason why. They left it the way it was, and I always said that the way they redid it, specifically if you looked at the East, it took away the matchup, the classic like Washington-Pittsburgh matchups, and I don't know if it was Carolina-Boston, whatever it was. I remember saying, you're going to take away that rivalry. Oh, here it was. They took it away because they wanted they wanted better matchups in the first part of the bracket, like what the opposite of that. They wanted to keep the best matchups later, like the Stanley Cup Finals and the Conference Finals.
I get that.
And I said I wanted it to be the opposite. I want the whole bracket to be knockout games. I want to see some one seeds with some hard fights around. I want to see Boston versus Tampa or whatever. I want to see some knockout rounds in the first round, and don't save the best watchability for the finals when you can stretch it out over many weeks of viewing.
Well, to your point, I feel like you get so many good second round matchups regardless. Like, you're going to have those rivalry ones crop up every single time, and it's like, that's what you want. Like, it just is what it is. Like, you want to see the Pittsburgh Penguins play the Washington Capitals. Like, that's just a matchup that you want to see on paper. Like, you want to see the battle for Florida like last year. You know, like there's so many things that you want to see on paper, and I think the current format is just fine. Who knows? Like, but I for sure am against the play-in. The play-in is kind of pointless. Like, you had 82 games to figure it out. No point in adding a play-in just to, add drama or whatever, a dramatic flair for viewership or to put another playoff game on TV.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I think the current playoff format is fine too, especially, when I look at how the Preds are doing currently right now in the playoffs, or I should say I'm cautiously hopeful in what I call the playoff hope meter, because we're 3 points back from a wild card spot right now. Preds are playing in Ottawa tonight. Hopefully, should be a win, but the Preds have a history of playing down the teams like Arizona and Ottawa. So I will not be surprised that when I'm editing this tonight and I find the score, future me finds the score that we have lost, I will not be surprised. But if we do win, I will be pleasantly surprised, knowing that we've now gotten 2 points and are closer again to getting a wild card spot. And it's been an interesting, we'll get to you in a second, man. I can see your face over there. And it's been an interesting time.
Yo-yo.
It's been about, like Daniel said, a yo-yo. I mean, a yo-yo, and we're kind of still where we're at. If you look at the Preds as a whole, last time we talked, they were 20th in the league. They're 21st. In the conference, they were 18th. The conference, they were 10th. Now we're 11th. Division-wise, we were 5th. Now we're 6th. Our record last time was 12-9-2 for a 5.65. We're now 18-14-6 for a 5.53. And it's just like, I don't know what's going on. We have games where we demolish people, and then we have games where it looks like we're the ones being demolished, and we don't know what we're doing. And I can't remember which game it was that we had a really good run. And I remember looking at Chelsea when it was going on. I said, games like this is what's going to make GMDP and the front office decide the team's good enough as it is. And then we get trashed the next game, and they're going, maybe not. Then we have another blowout or a good game. They're like, oh, no, we're good. And like Daniel said, it's a yo-yo back and forth.
Yeah. Okay. So I got some. We got some takes for this episode because we haven't even got to some of the juicier topics yet, which Matt and I are going to have strong opinions on. So basically we're in the same spot we were as of the last recording. Literally no difference. The only shocking point to me was I looked at the standings the other day and we're in front of the Avs. How is that possible right now? But that said, currently the Preds are on a very hot streak. The last several, I think 4-game win streak. So 3-game win streak while beating really quality opponents too. That said, it has been very interesting to me seeing the dynamics of the team. So we can talk about one of these games in particular. And the one that really stood out for me would be the Carolina Hurricanes game. Because guess what? We got pretty much manhandled that game, and yet we somehow won the game. And that's only because Juuse Saros is a stud right now, and he's getting hot, and he's climbing up the rankings on basically being one of the top contenders, maybe for a Vezina again this year. Granted, long season, once again, I don't think he'll get there because he started off so slow once again. But the last several games, he's been fantastic. The Hurricane game, he literally sets the record. I mean, this is absolutely phenomenal. We have the stats pulled up somewhere, right? He tied for third most ever in a game for saves, 64. And then in a non-OT game, that was the second highest save total in NHL history. NHL history. You got to let that sink in. These are historic numbers that he's doing. And I'm glad he got those saves and he did all that. And he was 3 or 4 goals above expected for that night for save percentage. But what does that say if you're giving up 64 shots in a game?
Says your defense is terrible.
Exactly. So right now, you only have a few people. Once again, it's the same thing as last year, carrying the whole team. The Preds are in that awkward limbo space. Again, they might be a playoff team. They might not. Well, guess what? The All-Star break is about to happen. They'll probably go on a run. Saros is getting hotter. And guess what? We'll probably sneak into the playoffs. But what is it going to probably amount to? Probably another first-round exit. And it's at what point, and I've been saying this, at what point do you actually start trading away some assets and actually going into rebuild mode, or do you just play this really back and forth limbo, oh, well, we're not going to get good draft picks and blah, 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 but we're also we're still making the playoffs, so everybody's happy, which I'm to be honest, first round exit is not making me pretty happy right now. But at the same time too, Saros is the ultimate lipstick on a pig right now. He's literally erasing, you're laughing, but it is a perfect analogy for this because he's erasing all the bad stuff right now on the back end when the front end is still garbage. They're absolutely not doing what they should. There's no way they should give up 64 shots in a game. It shouldn't happen. Yet we're still winning, and now we're on a win streak, and we're right back in the playoff race. Somebody explain that to me. And I think he's keeping John Hines in a job. Hot take.
Those are some hot ones, Daniel. I'll have to say I kind of agree. I mean, like you said, Saros has been phenomenal. If you give up that many shots, you're going to get toasted. He can only do it so many times. I mean, he's not Superman. So, an average night, he lets in 3 or 4 of those goals, probably. You know what I'm saying? I think even saying that you're going to be a playoff team is really stretching it this year. I see you guys. You're on a 3-game win streak, but I've seen the writing on the wall for 3 years now, and I said it earlier this year. This is going to be the year it's going to fall through, and that's the way I feel. We're going to get into some details of the Preds roster in a minute, but that's I think you're being quite optimistic, and I'm not quite buying it.
I'm not being optimistic. I'm saying you need to decide what you want to do. That's my thing is why are we still stuck in limbo? I've said for the past 1 or 2 years, if you're going to embrace the youth and do the whole thing, do it. Tank. Go get that number 1 pick. I'm sure everybody's tired of hearing about what's his flipping name because I've tried to block it out from Canada. What's his name? Number 1.
Bedard, but Connor Bedard.
Of course, it's another Connor. Why would it? Yeah, of course. But tank. I don't know what you guys want at this point. You're just stuck in an awkward position, and you got to decide what you want to do. Which gets me to another point: is when do you start trading assets, and who should you trade?
Well, that's an interesting question because I saw on Twitter last week there was some talk about possibly Alexander Carrier or even Matthias Ekholm being traded, and Fabro, yes, I'm okay with Fabro being traded. I'm not sure about Ekholm because he's been one of those core staples on the he stabilizes the group as a whole in the middle. And I'm do I really want to see him traded? We had Ryan Ellis. Now, it's a good thing we traded Ryan Ellis to Philadelphia because the next year he basically got injured and he's not played in forever and he may not play again. But how many pieces on this team are we going to trade or who is considered untouchable at this point, besides the players who have no movement clauses? Dan?
So for me, and that's a tough one because we did sign Ekholm at I feel like a fairly good rate for a long time, and it's $6.25 million for those interested. And the thing about Ekholm's contract is here recently he's looked a lot better, and he's been one of the better defensive pairings in the league, according to Money Puck, as well. And he's also been getting a lot more production on the stat sheet. I don't know if you've noticed the last couple games, he's been lighting it up. Ever since he made that move back to his original position, he has looked fantastic. So that's why it's kind of frustrating, but at the same time, too, Ekholm on the open market on a trade would fetch a premium. Like that's multiple draft picks. That's a high first rounder. If you know what I mean. Like that's a big time. Now, as far as some of these other ones are concerned, Fabro and Carrier are both RFA after this year. So those are huge potential trade bait right there. And especially Fabro because he has a little bit more potential offense, which we've never really seen with him. And honestly, he hasn't been that great for us this year. So I think if anyone goes, I do think it's Fabro. I don't know what type of return that you could look at. I don't know which teams desperately need a defenseman that bad that would be going on a cup run. So it'll be interesting to see towards the deadline which teams are out there looking for that. But I guarantee you one or two of them are shopped for sure. But for me, it's got to be Fabro that goes if you pick one. And the only way I'm okay with getting rid of Ekholm is if you really embrace the true, like, hey, we're blowing this thing up. We're going to try to get, a higher draft pick this year, and it's time to rebuild some. I'm tired of the competitive rebuild. So,
Matt, any thoughts from you?
I think, again, I'll say about Ekholm, we said this last year about somebody who was on the chopping block. It might have been Ekholm. I can't remember. No, it's Forsberg during the, he was trade bait during the, he was maybe going to test free agency, but he's not. I'm going to say the same thing about Ekholm that I think is a core identity piece, and the Preds have lost too much of that in the last 4 years that I wouldn't be personally comfortable with him leaving because I view him as a core asset, team identity. I like the notion of going towards the youth movement, but as we've seen in the past with John Hines, it's kind of mixed signals with who he's willing to play and not play in regards to youth. So it's odd about the blowing it up and going to rebuild because you guys don't really suck enough to go in total rebuild mode. But it is awkward because you're kind of in that limbo. You're in the middle. And that makes it difficult because you do have some assets. You're a fair team. You're not horrible and need to totally shoot the moon and go for broke. But that makes it harder because that means your goals aren't clearly defined. You don't know if you're on the uptake. We kind of think you're on the downslope as of the last 4 years because you went, you stepped up, you went first round, second round, third round, finals, and then you went third round, second round,
it's a
first
bell
round.
curve, literally a bell curve.
So you kind of know you're on an outward slope, but I don't know that necessarily means bottom it out yet, but it does make it awkward.
Speaking of Hines and players that weren't used or underused or, underutilized. So there was a Preds player that, just casually, I'm going to throw this in there, that got waived randomly over one of the nights. And I woke up in the morning to lovely tweets about it. And I literally wanted to throw my phone. And that was Eeli Tolvanen. John Hines was brought in to develop players. And he waives Tolvanen over all these other people. And then my favorite part is later on, there's all these tweets that come out about leadership really thought he was going to clear.
Yeah, that's bullcrap.
Yeah, it is. And guess what? Oh my God. So many thoughts on this because I'm you wouldn't even play him in really the role that he was lighting it up in the KHL. You wouldn't slot him in the same positions, by the way, on the power play that he was destroying. So for those of you who don't know, Seattle Kraken snatched him up, obviously, because, could you imagine just seeing this come over the waiver wire overnight and your team's low on the list? It's hello, yes, and sweet. He's $1.25 million. Yeah, we'll take him. Oh, by the way, he just scored another goal tonight. So he's at a point per game pace for them.
He scored 2 goals in the last 4 games for them.
3 now.
Yeah.
So It frustrates me so bad. Like, I literally could throw something because when I saw this, it just I lost it because I'm like, Hines came in here for the development of young players. You underutilize the player. Don't want to play him in the position that he was supposed to be in, which he's done with Ekholm this year. And by God, we finally got him back over to the other side, and he looks better. But you wouldn't do it with the younger kid, and now he's terrible. And, well, we can't use him, so we're just going to scratch him every night. So we're going to waive him, hopefully send him back down to Milwaukee. No, he gets picked up, and now that's a first-round draft pick that you had that was a steal of a first-round draft pick to begin with. And now he's on another team for peanuts. You got nothing. You got nothing in return. You didn't even trade him. You could have kept him on the roster and then traded him at the deadline. What are you thinking? Instead, you're putting in other scrubs like Cole Smith, who literally has 0 goals. Oh my God. Like, I'm going to be on such a rant over this for the next year or two. This is so stupid. This is one of the most ridiculous decisions the organization has made. And I don't think that was just on Hines. I think that goes all the way to the top. They're saying all the management was like, oh, he's going to clear.
Yeah, but
no.
Why even put a player on waivers that you're betting on clearing? That's just that's not a position of strength that you're like, oh, we thought we could just do this little slick move right here and then get him for cheaper and kind of screw the contract and start over and save $700,000. Like, that's a really sucky move. And like you said, since he scored, I checked that he scored tonight, 3 goals in 4 games for another organization, and he never got an assist. Oh my God!
So he's a point per game in the other organization. 3 goals in 4 games. And it's the first period in this game. He could score again and get another, so he might be above. He might be 1.2 or whatever. Whatever.
Yeah, this move, when we were talking about this a week or two ago, I said this was the thing. I married myself to Tolvanen on this team. He was my guy. He was my underdog who I was rooting for. Awesome player, and you guys treat him like this. You know what this reminds me of? How they treated Fleury in Vegas. Just throwed him away for scrap parts. He won the Vezina the year before, and then you traded him for nothing. You traded him for future considerations. 3 goals in 4 nights with another team. Let's waive him because we think we can save some money and get rid of him for free. That makes me not want to be a Preds fan right now.
But how much of this is actually on John Hines? Because one of the coaches that they seem to talk to a lot during the game and after the game is Dan Hinote. On December 12th, Dan Hinote said this about Cole Smith, that he was an 82-game player. He was someone that you know what you're going to get from him, which at this point is absolutely nothing, and that you can't have enough of these players on your team. Is this a mindset of the coaching group as a whole, or is this possibly coming down from GMDP down to the coaches?
Did Tolvanen not do exactly what they told him and asked for him when he got sent down? All those times in Milwaukee, we need you to become a 2-way player. That's what we heard every single time. And defensively, did he not get better? He got way better, actually, defensively. So he was that more complete player. He just wasn't basically getting the offensive production at the end that he was. But he got sent down multiple times to become that 2-way player. He did what they asked and then still gets waived. And I'm tired of it. And they were still underutilizing him. So
and I still think that's a load of crap. I mean, yeah, I want a guy who's good at both sides of the ice, but honestly, do you ask Ovechkin to play defense? Do you ask McDavid to play defense? The guy is a known power play specialist. I don't care if he's good at defense. As long as he's not a traffic cone liability, let him do what he does best and utilize him in his role. I think it's just kind of blowing smoke. I think there's mixed signals between GMDP and the training staff or whatever. It's awkward.
Well, that does lead me into another discrepancy I want to talk about, and that is the offense on this team. So you had, the big whatever with Forsberg last season to get his contract signed, and you look over here in the offense of goals, he leads our team with 15 goals. Nino Niederreiter leads our team in second with 12 goals. Matt Duchene has 11 goals. Then it just falls off the map. Rowan Josi, 9 goals. Ryan Johansson, 9 goals. Colton Sisson, 6 goals. Yakov Trenin, 5 goals. Granlund, 4 goals. He's more of an assist player. But it's like, as much as we're giving crap to the defense, we've also got to talk about the offense as well. They're not doing good. I mean, you can't rely on those 3 in forever. And let's just go ahead and get our top 5 out of the way. So, like I said, Philip Forsberg, Leads us overall with points, 34 points, 15 goals, 19 assists in 38 games. Roman Josi, second, 31 points, 9 goals, 22 assists. Matt Duchene, 30 points, 11 goals, 19 assists. Mikael Granlund, 25 points, 4 goals, 21 assists. Nino Niederreiter, 9 goals, 12 assists. And these are all 38, 37 games. And I feel like at this point in the season, these numbers should actually kind of be higher for a lot of those players. Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, you got your usual suspects up at the top, which is good. I mean, it's great that Forsberg's been producing. Matt Duchene's kind of a little slack this year, but whatever. Both of them had career years last year, so you're going to expect some regression.
It's back to his normal self, overhyped and overpaid, but
So,
continue.
Well, I mean, he's got 30 points in 37 games, so
That's
I mean,
pretty good.
That's fairly decent.
But it goes back to my bias of guys that make $8 million can only piss me off. But
yeah, I mean, but you could say the same thing about, you got to say the same thing about, Joey. He's not even on this list, and he's making just as much. So at least Duchene's actually been performing to his contract the last 2 years, so is what it is. But I think the one thing that people are forgetting is like Yakov Trenin also had a decent amount last year, but the biggest one that has regressed and just not been on the sheet, and it's not because he doesn't look good, and he's been hitting the post, and he's been just having tough puck luck, and that is Tanner Jeannot. Tanner Jeannot also had like 20 goals last year. I think he had like 22 goals. He has 3 this year. Oof.
Tommy Novak has more than him.
Yeah, Tommy has more. Parsonen has the same amount as him. Jeannot has regressed hard this year, and that's not been anything like he still looks good. He looks dangerous. They just haven't been, sinking. And that said, that really hurts. And offensively, this team has really struggled until recently, the last 3 or 4 games where we've actually been on a win streak and lighting it up. But I will say this, the Ducks, terrible team. Canadians, terrible team. So even though you scored 5 or 6 on them, I wouldn't think too much about that. I don't think their offensive problems are solved, but you're going to need that depth scoring, and the Preds are not getting depth scoring right now, and that is really hurting them really bad.
Well, could it be possible that even though Tanner Jeannot is not scoring as much, they're wanting to utilize him more for his defensive skills? Because, he's the first person on the ice that if something happens to a teammate, he's right there to stick up for them, and he's made it clear he don't care who you are. He'll fight as Daniel Chara. He does not care. Do you think the Preds value that more than his offensive or defensive capabilities?
I mean, yeah, he's on the herd line, so you obviously know that he's there to be a big body, throw his weight around. But the plus side last year was that he was sinking those goals, where this year they're not going in. So, he's doing his role. It's just way less offense. So you got to get some more offensive production from him. It is what it is. Hopefully he does, turn around. Actually, tonight, the Preds are winning right now, and the goal is from Roman Josi and then Jeremy Lauzon. Ooh, a rare goal from him. But that's the secondary scoring that you need. You need people like that to show up on the stat sheet. It doesn't need to be very top-heavy, which it has been recently. Oh, just another side note, the Kraken scored again, and Tolvanen was the primary assist. I'm done. I just want to check out.
That's like
now.
the most flip the table.
And this is just the first period, so he'll probably get another goal or an assist in this game against the Canadians. So yeah, they're gonna end up scoring nine goals against the Canadians tonight. So yeah, oh man, I'm still so frustrated with that right now because you're just underutilizing everything. You just gave away a guy who, and here's my deal, on this roster too. What are some of the players that Hines and them are deciding to keep in, kind of like you're saying, over people like Tolvanen, over people like Philip Tomasino, who is still sitting in the AHL, who played, 74 games for us, 76 games for us last year, Tomasino did. He was already in your system, but now we have Cole Smith, who has 0 goals. I don't know. I can't answer these questions. I mean, it is what it is, but it is very frustrating to watch right now, the roster decisions. But yeah, so you got to get more depth going for sure right now.
Well, I want to go to Coach Matt. So Coach Matt gets control of the Preds. What's the first thing you do? GNDP says, you're the coach. You can do anything. What's the first thing you do?
Well, it's kind of my classic line I go to lately. I say stop taking freaking penalties. I was just trying to find the stat. I'm sure you guys lead the NHL in penalty minutes still, and it's very difficult to win games shorthanded, especially you guys' PK is pretty good this year, but what's that? 75%. So that means if you take 4 penalties a game, you're going to get scored on once per game. And how many times is that the difference in the ball game? Is that one goal right there? And it's usually stuff that's avoidable. Like you mentioned your boy, who was it? Not Borbieski, but some other little pest. He's in there. He's in there to cause a ruckus and stir up a fight. But fighting after your main player gets hit, that's one thing. But just these lazy hookings, penalties, trippings, these little things that can be avoided, they're lazy penalties, and we have to get that out of the game if you hope to play good hockey, because you have to play 5-on-5. Your team is not good enough to play shorthanded for 4 or 5 penalties a game. So that's my number one go-to.
And Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, for me, what's crazy is I was just looking it up. We're at like 79% for the penalty kill. So to your point, very good actually, despite taking all the penalties. What are we at penalties? Like 8th? I think you were pulling it up. Or total penalties taken. We actually are further down the list than I thought. Where are we at?
We are 14th.
14th.
Okay, that's much better than
it's been a lot better recently. The start of the season was really bad, and I think that's also another reason why our penalty kills suffered in the beginning as far as our numbers. So they have been slowly improving, which is a good sign. The power play is still in the dumps at 18%, 28th in the league. So still not very good. That would really help if you also didn't waive, a key player who's a power play specialist. But, that is what it is. Just not going to make a big deal about that either. So it's just like, I don't know. I think if you're coming in there, do I have the power to say who I want to trade and all this stuff? Well, if it's me, I'm trying to blow it up a little bit. Like, I'm trying to get rid of some player that isn't producing that would return me an asset, and that would be trading Fabro. And Fabro has been kind of like a key fixture for us for a little bit, but I don't think he panned out to what we were hoping he was going to be when we drafted him from Boston College. That just is what it is. It's no hard feelings. Somebody else needs somebody, like another fill-in or a third pair or whatever for a deep playoff run. I think he'll fit in great there. I'm definitely getting rid of him, getting some assets in return, maybe even possibly. I don't want to get rid of Ekholm, but if you're gonna not make the playoffs, then go for it. Go big.
I think if you're going that route, I'd shed all the big contracts. Like if you're making $8 million, I'm looking at you to try to dump a contract. But the problem is
you're not going to get rid of them.
Contracts are harder to get rid of.
Yeah, the Ekholm contracts are the one people want because they're like, he's already producing and he's at $6 million. Oh yeah, that's the sweet spot. Like they're like, I can take it on. He's going to be great for production and defense for the next several years. So that's why everybody's licking their chops over Ekholm. Where if you get a point per game, Duchesne, that's great, but he's also at $8 million, which is also a big cap, space. So it is what it is.
And to be fair, looking at cap friendly, both Forsberg and Yossi have no movement clauses too. So that's at least, if I do my math right, that's at least $17.5 million that's locked up as well too that you can't do anything about.
Yeah, but those two are not going anywhere. Like you couldn't get rid of any of those because Forsberg is going to be good for several years to come. Obviously, Yossi is the backbone of the team right now, and he drives most everything. So, yeah, you can't even get rid of that. Interesting to note, though, Tanner Jeannot is also a restricted free agent. Who knows? Cody Glass has also been doing good here recently. He's going to be a restricted free agent. So, I don't know. There are going to be some weird decisions this year as far as the roster. We have a lot of RFAs, a lot. But the interesting ones that I feel like would get shopped would be Carrier, Fabro, or a long-term, $6.25 million Ekholm, which would probably command a hefty return. It better command a hefty return if he did get traded.
So one of the final thoughts I have is that if the Preds do not make the playoffs this season, is this the end of John Hinote? Sorry, not John Hines. Wow, I combined John Hines and Dan Hinote. Yeah. But you know what? Why not? Is this the end of John Hinote?
Dan Hinote, let's see. I do really like him as a coach, and I think all the players do like him. So I don't know. Is it the other Dan in charge of the power play?
I believe he is.
Because we have a Dan and a Dan.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, like I always get them confused. I'm getting rid of the who's controlling our power play. Sorry.
I'm getting some experience behind the bench.
Yeah.
They were kind of like no names. Your team deserves to have somebody that's got some history, some longevity to their career there. So I like to get a little more experience behind the bench, and I don't care if that's John Hines, High Note, whoever. Give me somebody a little bit better. I've been skeptical of Hines ever since the start.
Yeah. It's Dan Hino and Dan Lambert
Yeah.
are the two. It's also Lambert who's in charge of the power play. So
Well, guys, I don't want to end the episode on an angry or a sad note, so let's talk about the All-Star vote real quick. Matt, what you got over there for us?
Yeah, so, this year, how many years have been since we did the John Scott? 4 or 5 years now, where we did the John Scott meme year, which was the last time we had an All-Star vote. For those who are newcomers to hockey, the fans get to vote who they want as the team captain and all this. So John Scott is like the worst player for the Arizona Coyotes in their history. He's got like 2 goals in 10 plus years of playing hockey. So he's horrible. And for some reason, the fans got together. Now, the rule was there was no vote limit. Your fan could go in there every night and vote 100 times for John Scott. And that's what they did. Somebody in some room like ours got together and said, we're going to meme pick John Scott, this loser from Arizona, and we're going to make him the captain for the All-Star game. And that's what happened. So we call it the meme year. So this year, they are risking it again. Now, they have allowed, they're going to allow fan votes again this year. I said when that happened, they should have just scratched that off and just given it to the real person like Stamkos or whoever was going to be the actual captain for fan vote, because you're opening yourself up to a situation where the fans could be hilarious again. We'll see if it happens or if the NHL ignores it. I don't know, but it is interesting that that's going to happen again. And while we're on the subject of league news, one last thing we'll mention as we're wrapping it up here. Daniel said the same thing I've been saying, that I'm really tired of hearing Connor Bedard's name because they did the juniors recently, World Juniors. And it's one of those things that I love to watch. If you guys will ever watch, I hear it. I don't watch other sports, but I hear that if you like football, a lot of people like watching college football as opposed to the pros. So I wish we had better access to watching the younger teams, like the college hockey teams, or in this case, the U18 at World Juniors. But we did never have it covered on television here, so it's really difficult for us to be able to watch it. But I think that would be a more exciting way to watch hockey in a younger teams, a little more razzle-dazzle. It's not as refined as NHL teams. So that being said, with razzle-dazzle, Connor Bedard is a name I've heard nonstop for the last 2 weeks because he has been absolutely popping off. Currently a WHL player, but he is on pace. Let's see. He has, in the WHL, now that he's back, he has 93 points in 36 games, which is absolutely ridiculous. More than 3 points per game. He's on pace for, if you extrapolate that to an 82-game season, he's on pace for 212 points and 91 goals. And so that recently, the tournament, the World Junior Tournament, not only is he lighting it up in the WHL, he lit it up at this tournament. He has the most points in a tournament by an under-18 player in all-time history. 23 points. Yager only had 18. Gretzky only had 17. And Connor Bedard had 23.
yeah. I mean, he's been lighting it up. There's no way around it. But I'm tired of hearing his name though.
Yes.
And he's also another Connor. So
Yes.
it's shocking.
This is one of those situations where I forget who the kid was. You're always keen on whoever's going to be the number 1 draft pick of the year. We always have our sights on that one guy. I forget who it was last year. That we kept hearing his name a lot. And it was like, oh, he'll be okay. He'll be just a normal, maybe fizzle out after a couple of years. But Connor Bedard is one of those guys that it looks like, by all means, that he's going to be a lasting, staying presence in NHL. If he's throwing up numbers better than Yager and Gretzky at 17 years old or whatever, he's going to be a fixture in NHL for years to come. So I am quite excited to watch him as he gets drafted going forward. But I wish we could check some of his games out because I'm sure I catch the highlights, on Twitter, but some razzle-dazzle hockey there from the young kids.
All it's going to take, Matt, is him to do one lacrosse goal, and you're going to be done with him. You'll be like, I'm tired of watching this kid.
That's so true. Oh, Matt will be screaming at the clouds. He's going to be like, get off my porch.
That is true.
But Matt, as we get ready to close the show down, it's been a while. Have you collected any stats over the past month that you can talk to us about?
Oh, Kyle, I've got
There's so many.
We have so many. I'll mention just a couple highlights here, some milestones. My boys, the Bruins, baby, they're doing it this year. Go ahead and put money on them. They're my Cup favorites this year. We'll see how that goes in another month. I'll probably change my mind, but whatever. The Bruins, they are now the third team in history to have 30 wins in 38 games.
Historic. Crazy.
Unbelievable season for Boston. They're putting it out on the ice, baby. My boy Marchand. So also McDavid is now, he has, 70 points in 37 games, and that is the fifth fastest the fifth fastest in NHL history to have that many points in that few of games. That's the fewest since Yager and Lemieux in 91. So that's the best brand of hockey in 30 years, essentially. And, of course, we hear his name on the stat sheet all the time. So not a surprise. McDavid's fire on the ice. And I'm going to give a hat tip to my boys. The Detroit Red Wings the other night had an OT comeback win, 4-goal comeback win for the first time in almost 4 decades, baby. The Wings are on fire. It's going to be our year, Kyle. Can't you feel it? The best hockey comeback in almost 4 decades. We're feeling it, baby, in Detroit town.
But, the question then becomes, is Detroit going to make the playoffs and win the Cup, or is Boston going to make the playoffs and win the Cup?
Oh, it's you can ride the Red Wings all the way through, buddy. You can put money on it, Kyle.
Well, Daniel, we'll have to see about that. What do you think?
Well, Matt, you forgot to mention a Red Wing that got surpassed, too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you did.
Yeah, let's put it back on him so we can see his frowny face.
Yeah. He luckily, Ovechkin broke Gordie Howe's record. He luckily didn't do it against the Red Wings. He broke the last record, whatever it was, against Detroit. And luckily he didn't do this one against Gordie Howe's former team. That would have been a slap in the face. I was going to be mad.
He did it on a hat trick, too.
Yeah. He had enough respect to lay low and do it the next game. I think it took him 2 more games after the Detroit game. But my man knows how to respect the legend. So, but hat tip to Ovechkin, man. He's on fire.
Matt, this right here. Little violin you've been playing ever since. I remember when you texted us when he broke that, you were so mad. Yeah. Oh, goodness. But, Daniel, what games we got coming up?
We got Toronto, Montreal, and then we have Buffalo, Calgary, and Columbus, followed by St. Louis and Los Angeles. So kind of like up and down. Definitely some teams that are struggling on this list, so that's much needed because I felt like we just ran the gauntlet with some actually harder competition, and we actually pulled out some wins that we shouldn't have, which is huge this time of year. So keep it up. We'll see where we're at the next episode, and stay tuned for another roller coaster Preds ride, because I feel like, like next week we'll be in the dumps again, and Facebook and Twitter will be, telling them to fire Hines, and then the week after that they're going to go on another 4-game streak, and then we'll be right back to where we are. So that's how we've been this season.
And guys, that's the show for the day. If you like us, you can find us on Twitter at Music City Gold. You can find us on YouTube at Music City Gold. And you can also find us at penaltyboxradio.com. Until next time, we will see you on the ice.